In this video, we're going to be breaking down these really cool garden boxes that were shared by Sam in the MakerPipe community. And these are made entirely out of 3/4 inch EMT conduit, and the pieces of conduit are put together and connected with MakerPipe steel connectors that are made specifically for building projects like this with EMT conduit. And these are really cool. We only have this one photo, but that's okay because we can see a lot of this frame and break it down. And they have these really beautiful garden boxes here that are elevated off the ground, and basically just built these steel frames on top that have two doors that can be open and closed to access the garden. And it's just a really great project to protect the garden beds from any critters and things that want to get in there and steal and eat the plants. So really cool. And basically we'll just go ahead and break this down. And it's really simple overall. It's just a big box basically on each side, and it's just the same frame twice. So we'll just break it down once. But basically we've got 8 90-degree connectors, which are used in the corners. You know, got one in each corner. And those connectors are what you would use anytime you're making any sort of three-dimensional box, because they allow you to basically connect a vertical piece of conduit that runs continuously through the connector. And we've got, that piece of conduit is going through the middle of both the top and bottom 90-degree connector. But then they also allow you to have 2 more pieces of conduit connected that terminate inside of the connector. Because if you use MakerPipe connectors, you don't have to do any drilling or welding. You just use a 5mm hex wrench to squeeze the 2 components together, or usually it's 2 pieces, sometimes there's more, but it squeezes around the conduit and clamps them in place just based on friction. And so we've got a piece of conduit coming out of the 90 on both of these that go from one side to the other. And then of course it's going to be mirrored in the back there in the exact same way, with just those pieces of conduit terminating in the connector and then going from one side to the other. And then we've got one more piece of conduit in there which terminates and then goes from the front to the back. And it's just really simple and does the same thing on both sides and on the top and bottom. It just goes from one side of the frame to the other, just inside of those 90-degree connectors, and that completes the box pretty much. So anytime you're making a 3-dimensional box, that's the way you would do it. You just use those 90-degree connectors in the corners, and you can create this box shape, and then you can customize it from there, as they did, by adding more bracing and the doors and such. So I'm going to go ahead and do another screenshot just so we can kind of see everything kind of individually. So we have that main box frame, and then we can see it looks like just underneath that the top rung that goes all the way around, they actually have T-connectors here to add supports from one side to the other. And I would imagine they did this just to kind of frame out the door a bit differently than, making the door completely, the same height as the whole frame. So instead, the piece of conduit is just going from one side to the other. And so that vertical that we looked at the beginning is just running through the top half of the MakerPipe T connector here, and then the piece that's terminating inside of it is just going here all the way to the other side. And that just kind of completed that framework there to kind of frame out the doors. And then we can see they also use some 45-degree bracing. This looks like it's on the back pipe, I believe. And basically, it's just a 45-degree connector. It functions very similarly to the T connectors where it connects 2 pipes. Again, it's just the vertical that we saw earlier that run to the 90-degree connectors. The 45-degree connector is just grabbing onto that and then sending a pipe up at a 45-degree angle up to another 45-degree connector up here that is grabbing onto the horizontal piece that we looked at earlier, and that is just going from one side to the other, and the 45-degree connector is grabbing onto that as well. So that's how they did the 45-degree bracing, and you can always customize, and I always recommend that if you're kind of lost on how to brace a project, there's a lot of different ideas for bracing, and it depends on the project, the dimensions, how much weight is going to be on the frame, things like that. So I always recommend, make that main box first and then have some 45-degree connectors on hand, or just place subsequent orders later down the road and add more bracing as you need it, because you might build the main rectangular frame and you might be happy with that strength and find out that it holds up great depending on where you live and the seasons that you have. And then you might find you need a lot more bracing. And so then you could just add more over time. That's kind of the beauty of clamp style connectors. But basically, we've got just a few 45-degree braces. There's another one down here, same exact technique, just a 45-degree connectors grabbing onto the horizontals and the verticals, and then just sending this 45-degree angled pipe at, from one point to the other, from one point on the bottom up to the sides. It looks like there's only 2 of those per garden bed, just to add some extra support, nice and simple. And then another bracing technique that they did here, actually, I see another 45 degree. It's kind of hiding up here, but this is 2 more 45 degree connectors, just grabbing on, and then there's an angled brace between those as well. And I think I only see one of those on that side. So just some minimal bracing here and there. Like I said, just do what you need. You don't have to overbuild it unless you just want to. I tend to overbuild things. But then we got one more brace I see here, which is the T connector grabbing on that we saw earlier, and the same connector that we saw earlier, and it's just doing the same thing as the 45s, except this is just a straight front to back piece of conduit, nothing angled or anything like that. That's really all the bracing I see. And then really to finish off this build, it's just the gates. So we'll look at those separate again here. And it's basically just 2 squares that fit nicely in this frame here. Actually, before I do that, if we look closely, we can see here, there's T connectors grabbing on to the bottom horizontal and then going up to the top. And this is really what's framing out those doors. So that's really simple. It's just a T connector going down and then another T connector at the bottom to secure that in place. And that's necessary because that's what the hinges are bolted onto here. Those two are that piece of conduit, as we can see here. And those are the 3D printed hinges that we have on the website. Those are made by a community member named Billy, or Northwoods Engineered. I'll link his website and YouTube channel down below. I recommend checking it out. But those hinges are just on those vertical pieces of conduit. And then we can see we've got the 2-dimensional rectangles here, and those are just making up the gates. And if you're making a 2-dimensional rectangle, I would recommend using T connectors because you don't have 3 pipes. Like if you're making a box or a 3-dimensional rectangle, then you use the 90 as I recommended. But for 2 dimensions, just use the T connector and use them as elbows and just grab on so you've got the piece going continuously through the top of the connector and then the other piece that terminates inside of there. And you can just do that same technique to make a 2-dimensional rectangle here. And then you just add the hinge going through the piece of conduit on the gate, and then you can open and close this. As we can see here, they've got 2 that are kind of facing each other, so you can open them up and have full access to the garden inside, and that is just really awesome. And I'm pretty sure that completes the framework. And then just to secure this to the garden bed, it looks like, from what I can tell, it looks like either electrical hanger straps, which I'll put some of those on screen so you can see what I'm talking about. And if not that, we've also seen a lot of people just use the conduit 2-hole straps. They're super inexpensive and allow you to secure frames like this to wooden things. And it's basically just a tab that goes over, and then you can drill a hole, or you actually don't even have to drill a hole. It already has them pre-drilled. Just put a screw through each of the tabs, and you can really secure down the framework to wood and other flat materials. So I would imagine it kind of looks like that they use the hanger straps there. Not entirely sure which one, but either one would work just fine and would hold it down really well. And the last thing, of course, is going to be the enclosure material. And it looks like this is just chicken wire that you can get off the shelf at different places. Lowe's and Home Depot has it. I think Tractor Supply and pretty much most hardware and home improvement stores should have it as well. So you can pick that up while you're getting your EMT conduit. And you could just secure that to the frame with metal zip ties, or you can use regular nylon zip ties. Really lots of different ways you can secure that. We've seen people use metal wire, kind of route it around the EMT conduit and then in the holes of the chicken wire. And then just depending on what kind of animals you're trying to keep out, you can get really small holes if you're trying to keep out birds and really small animals. But if you're just trying to keep out deer and larger things, you can get some cattle panels or some different fencing that has larger holes if you're not too worried about smaller critters. But that's really cool. Really awesome build, Sam. Thanks so much for sharing this. Did a great job, and we love seeing it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those down below, and I'll get back to you with as much information as I can give. If you like this video, leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.